Thanks for joining us for Special Report Online. I'm Bret Baier. If you are not an SRO regular, welcome aboard. Everything here is a little bit more laid back. A good chance to interact with the panel. Let us know what you're thinking. Weigh in on the issues. And with that, we have our panel, Julie Pace with the Associated Press, syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. And tonight, we have a special guest appearance, the lovely and talented Fox News Channel chief legal correspondent, Shannon Bream.
I mean, I'm no Steve Hayes, but I will try to substitute in.
Steve Hayes had an important meeting with the Washington Capitals.
Well, you know, we've all had those important meetings. Yeah.
All right. Well, let me get, first of all, the Ted Cruz stuff. Lots of response to the interview. Some people are calling me an establishment hack, a Rubio lover. Others say I called Cruz on the carpet. Thoughts on that, and specifically on the immigration, Shannon?
Well, you know how this works. Anytime you feature anybody in a positive or negative light, whoever it's their candidate or not their candidate, I mean, they all tweet to us and say, you don't cover so-and-so enough, you cover so-and-so too much. But I think people would watch that interview and say those were straightforward questions. They're questions that Cruz knew at some point probably he would have to answer.
After last night.
Yeah, and it's his own record. So you were giving him a chance to explain himself, but people who didn't like that, I'm sure, will let you know on Twitter.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm sure the Rubio people are sending it out because they have this back and forth. And, you know, what does that do to affect that narrative on immigration? I mean, Rubio still has a problem at the heart of the Republican primary voter on this issue.
He really does. And I mean, for Rubio, immigration was always going to be a problem because he can't walk away from his prior position, because there's endless video of him standing with Chuck Schumer, standing with other Democrats, and backing the Gang of Eight bill. So he basically has to embrace it and try to couch it by talking about the long process that he would now want to put in place before allowing people to get green cards. But I mean, they think that if they can get I think that they were surprised that Ted Cruz made that declarative of a statement last night. I don't think that they were expecting that. And so I think that they feel, the Rubio campaign feels like that gives them an opening now to try to shift this debate. He still needs to figure out his own politics on this, but I think that they now see a good opportunity.
P-San, I appreciate SR asking direct questions. Good job. 668. Shannon looks better than Steve and just about everyone else on the planet. 668.
Hi, Mom. Mom is logged in tonight.
I don't know. 668. I don't think so. Okay. Charles, thoughts?
Look, what was interesting about your interview is that it was one quotation or soundbite from the guy you were interviewing after another. I mean, it wasn't as if you said, well, I interpret what you say. You just said, well, you've told us that you've never supported legalization. Here's the clip. And then the Cruz, I was surprised because I have never seen him in a place where he looked trapped and didn't quite know where to go. So, A, he pretended that this was a poison pill, and then you said, well, you know, you did say 3 times that it was not. You wanted to pass it. You wanted to get something that the country would agree on. And then when you hit him with that, the only place he could go is to try to slide away and to talk about other things. I mean, when at the end he was reduced to saying, look, what you're saying, you, Bret, can't be true, that I'm contradicting myself, because after all, it would imply that Jeff Sessions was for amnesty, so it can't be true. I mean, that is really reaching, and he basically, I'm surprised, because he's not only a great debater, and he sure knows how to shift into another mode and to try to change the subject, but he's also prepared. You would think he would have that answer prepared, or did the staff not tell him that you crossed, I hate to say this, a Rubicon last night when he made you say that, or when you stumbled into saying, I never supported legalization?
But isn't it a challenge for the Rubio campaign to attack on this issue? I mean, basically, they're going to try to pivot to truth and honesty and saying it like it is and blah, 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 not specifically on the immigration issue, right?
Look, it's a double-edged sword, but look, this, I think, we're almost on a one-on-one. There's a chance for Christie and perhaps some crazy outsider, but I think this is Rubio and Cruz deciding who gets the championship fight.
With Trump.
With Trump. Trump is out there. He's up there at the top. It's like in boxing in the old days. There would be a fight that would set up the championship fight. They knew it. It was a setup last night. CNN kept insisting on a fight between them. And they went at it. I thought it was a rather interesting exchange on the merits and on the issues, and they both, I thought, did well. But when you're in that, you have to take chances. Rubio has been sort of stuck and hovering. It isn't as if he sank. He's still up there, but he's on the cusp. He needs to stay within range of Cruz. I think it's a gamble. You're right. To bring up immigration is not your strongest suit, but he has to gamble on something. I think that's not a bad thing.
But if you look at polling on immigration, I always find this interesting because when you get in Republican primaries, there's this theory and this narrative that all Republican voters take a very hardline position on immigration and would never support somebody who backs citizenship or legalization. And if you look at polling, that's not necessarily true. A lot of people will say in polls, and if I can put in a plug for our AP poll coming out tomorrow, that even if they oppose legalization or citizenship themselves, they would be willing to vote for a candidate that does. It's not so hardline when you actually start talking to Republican voters, and I think that's what the Rubio people are counting on.
Terry in Maryland, Cruz doesn't have the disarming joke to escape such queries that Ronald Reagan did.
There you go again,
There
Bret.
you go again, Bret.
You can maybe use that Rubio-con, though.
Yeah, that's Paul Joseph, 88K, points to Dr. K for Rubicon pun. Very nicely done.
Well, you know, the first time that I met Ted Cruz, he was arguing a case at the Supreme Court as the Solicitor General. So you've seen him in action. You know that if he can stand there with those 9 justices getting battered over and over again and make it look easy, which it's one of the hardest things you could ever do as an attorney, to stand up against those 9, I knew then when I met him that he had a special skill. I mean, I hadn't seen anyone else argue the way that he does. So my thought has to be the Rubio folks know Rubio is going to take heat on this issue if they can muddy it up with Cruz, and it's the one thing that seems to make him uncomfortable, or that he doesn't have a smooth, clear, slick answer for, because we know in politics when you're explaining, you're in trouble.
That's right.
Yeah.
Doc Carter, Fox News continues to demonstrate its loyalty to the Republican establishment. I'm very disappointed in you, Bret. Doc, listen, if you look back at interviews, Jeb Bush, I asked him tough questions, very tough questions. Chris Christie, just recently on this set, about gun control. I pulled up things that he said in his early political life that had him stammering a bit as well, if you remember that. Go back to Mitt Romney in the campaign, and when it was a very uncomfortable and very unusual interview, according to Mitt Romney. Those are kind of establishment figures who we are pressing just like we press anybody else, whether you are more conservative, whether you're an outsider, an insider. It's about asking questions. Fair?
I think so. Look, I mean, establishment is meant to be the dirty word today. Another word, older word, would have been mainstream. There are people on the outside, there are people on the inside, you know, and we don't even talk about who's conservative and who's not. The idea is that the sort of the bomb throwers, or the outsiders, if you like, are the more conservative, and the establishment is a sort of sold-out, pseudo-liberal clique. It's simply not true. If you look at the Trump agenda, or what, you know, the list of his ideas, they are not conservative, generally speaking. And the guy, you know, has only recently been in the GOP. So it's not a clean-cut yes, no establishment, inside, outside. There's sort of a mainstream right-of-center liberalism, conservatism, which has been the major element in the party for 20 years. And then there are outsiders. They're the libertarians, you know, who don't fit on the spectrum. And then there are the moderates and the more conservative. But I mean, it's sort of become a cliche. You are establishment, and that's supposed to carry all kinds of connotations.
Mark says, perhaps in honor of Star Wars, Ted Cruz tells Bret Baier these aren't the droids he's looking for. Other people say good interview. Other people say things that we can't read on the air.
Even on
Marco Rubio, by the way, was on this set. We asked him very tough questions. I've done some questioning about his support of Libya, his relationship with a former Congressman, David Rivera. Those are not easy questions. But anyway, we move on. Chris Christie from last night. Let's talk, Julie, about this. Let's play a soundbite and get his positioning from last night's debate.
This is what it's like to be on the floor of the United States Senate. I mean, endless debates about how many angels on the head of a pin from people who've never had to make a consequential decision in an executive position. This is the difference between actually having been a federal prosecutor, actually doing something, and just spending your life as one of 100 debating it. Let's talk about how we do this, not about which bill each one of these guys likes more.
Now, that is an argument, Julie, that he made numerous times. Governors, executives versus senators who argue things in committees and on the Senate floor.
And you can see in that clip why Chris Christie, at a certain point in his political career, was seen as a potential GOP nominee. He's a very talented guy. He has charisma. He, I think, makes points that really resonate with a lot of voters. You know, this experience executive argument is tricky in this cycle, though, because of what Charles was talking about, that it's not necessarily that people are going to their moderate or conservative polls. They're more going to the experienced politician or outsider polls. And so in a state like New Hampshire, that argument might work very well for Chris Christie. I don't know if it's going to be compelling going forward. It may be, but at this point, I don't know if the electorate is really going to buy into that.
Shannon, I mean, he's obviously put his chips on New Hampshire. He spent all his time there. He might as well be running for governor in New Hampshire.
And it's working. I mean, he's gaining some traction there. He should get a payoff for the amount of time and effort that he has invested there. I really think it's clear this would have been his lane had Trump not entered this race. The tough talker, the bombastic, the I know how to make decisions, I get things done. I think he would get a lot more air in that lane if Trump wasn't in the race, out Christie. I mean, that's kind of, comes off as sort of a paler shade of Trump. They have completely different experiences, but that same tough talking, I'll get things done. I mean, he started off his campaign, the telling it like it is tour, the campaign. So I think that it's a tough place for him to capitalize on, knowing that Trump is taking up that space of the conversation.
And, you know, one of the benefits that Christie has had, if there's a benefit of being very low polling, is that people don't really focus on your negatives and your possible controversies and scandals. He's gotten away without having to answer a lot of questions in the context of this campaign about Bridgegate and some of his things in New Jersey.
Rand Paul brought it up.
But Rand Paul brought it up,
and
right. And as you start to rise,
right.
As you start to rise, though, you're going to see that come up more and more, and we haven't seen how he would handle that in the context of this campaign.
But when Rand brought it up, he elicited groans from the crowd. So it was not exactly a telling issue. Maybe in a general election campaign it would work, but it was almost like you expected somebody to turn around and say, I'm tired of hearing about the damn Bridgegate story.
Yeah. Rand Paul actually had a good night, didn't he?
Yeah,
I mean,
think he did.
Yeah,
as far as the other debates, he had the most impact substantively in the debate.
Absolutely. I thought it was his best debate. He was throwing Hail Marys. He went after Trump, unlike the others, except for Bush. And he presents a position that I don't agree with at all in foreign policy, but he did it really well. And when he went, I think the reason that Rubio had a tough night, I think he did okay, but it was not the night where he dominated as he had in the past, is because it wasn't only Cruz hitting on him, it was also Rand Paul. And Rand Paul kept piling up from a more isolationist stance, and he did it extremely well. I thought it was his best performance.
I mean, I always throw out on social media to our followers, who do you think had a good night, bad night, and get kind of their feedback. And there was a common thread that even people who, like Charles, aren't big fans of Rand Paul's foreign policy, a lot of people think, you know, he explained his position well and they got where he was coming from, and that he held his own in the back and forth.
Carly Fiorina, do we have that soundbite from the Fed? We could just play that. Okay, move it down. And then she had another one of these strong performances, I think. She seems comfortable in this format. This is her talking about the interest rates. Take a listen.
What has this zero interest rate policy done? Who has it harmed? It's harmed these people. It's harmed middle class folks. It harms savers. The investor class has been helped by zero interest rate policy because zero interest rates have juiced the stock market, they've juiced the real estate market. But if you're saving for retirement, you're saving for a college education, you're saving for your first home, you have been harmed by a zero interest rate policy. So it's about time.
You know, she can basically, Julie, talk about any topic. And last night she brought some new arguments into it with this high-tech stuff, the stuff that she did as the CEO of HP with technology and the NSA, talking about the importance of business working with the government and getting things done. pretty effective, but can she make any kind of move?
You know, it's going to be really tough for her at this stage. I mean, she has proven to be a very effective communicator. I think she's a skilled debater. I think she connects with people on the campaign trail. Everywhere that I go, when I ask people about candidates that they are thinking about supporting, almost to a person, people will throw in at the end, you know, I really like Carly. She's making an impression in these states, but her organization hasn't been able to harness that. They've really struggled for months in how to do this. And we're now at the point of the campaign where you have to take your organization and turn it into votes. And I'm just not sure she's going to be able to do that. I do think she's going to be a part of the Republican Party for a long time. I think she potentially could be part of a Republican administration if there is one. So she's really, I think, made a name and carved out a place for herself, but I think it's hard to imagine her being the nominee.
Charles?
Look, I hate to say this because it sounds genderist, but she obviously will be on a short list. I don't think she's going to win a nomination to be number 2, and she fits the bill, I think, in a really good way. She likes to attack, which is the job of a number 2 on any ticket. I mean, Paul Ryan, for example, was not your ideal number 2 as a candidate because he did, you know, that's not what he does. She loves to attack, and she likes to attack Hillary. And I think she is fluid on any issue. You could put her in a vice presidential debate, and you know she's going to acquit herself well. Obviously, she's very talented. I think she would end up for sure in the cabinet of any Republican administration. But as you say, her campaign is too thin to sustain the rigors of it through all these places. And remember, she started at 0 name recognition. It's really hard to overcome that unless you're a, no, I won't say it.
Okay, don't even
a reality TV star? No.
Doc Carter has responded, and we respond to Doc.
Okay. Let's hear it.
I appreciate your comments, Bret, but it still seems to me that you went out of your way with Cruz. I was really delighted when you said you'd be interviewing Cruz instead of interviewing Rubio yet again, so I was disappointed. As far as Dr. Krauthammer's comments go, establishment refers to the Republicans who go along to get along, who do what their donors want even when their constituents are overwhelmingly opposed, and cave to the Democrats over and over again. Look at the latest budget the House is about to pass. The Republican Party is certainly no longer the party of Ronald Reagan.
But, I mean,
first of all, I don't have a horse in this race. I just cover the place. But go ahead.
Look, the budget was passed by Paul Ryan. Is he establishment? Has he sold out to his donors? The guy didn't even want to be Speaker of the House. He's the guy who came up with a radical Medicare reform, got it through the House, where every Republican, save 4, went on the record and supported the radical Medicare reform. Is that a guy who goes along to get along? Look, I mean, I think these words are thrown around because Republicans have not had control of the White House. The way the Constitution is written, you can't govern from one house of the White House. That leads to frustration, that leads to people to think that the reason that Obama hasn't been stopped and all this stuff he wants to do is because of bad faith. I think that is wrong, and it is sort of terribly unfair.
That's true.
To people like Paul Ryan, who believe in stuff and try to get as much as they can.
Listen, if you look at just the past bills under John Boehner that passed the House but died in the Senate, first under Senator Harry Reid, obviously, when he was blocking almost a goalie for the White House, and now under Mitch McConnell because he doesn't have 60 votes to get it through. I think there is some disconnect between people who voted in 2014 and said, oh, it's a Republican Senate and a Republican House, let's get this thing done. And there's a Democratic president and not 60 votes in the Senate.
And I think this actually is a central question of Cruz's candidacy, because you hear people talk about liking Cruz because he's principled, and then you also hear those same people say, and I want Washington to get stuff done. Sometimes in order to get stuff done, I mean, this is just reality, right? In order to get stuff done, you have to get people to come along with you, and not everybody in your own party and certainly in the other party is going to agree with you on everything. And could a Cruz presidency actually accomplish anything unless he had, you know, a 60-seat majority in the Senate and an overwhelming majority in the House? I'm not sure that's possible. He has to prove that to voters, I think.
Tigger TLW says, just because Republicans don't control the White House doesn't absolve them from passing bills they believe in. Let Obama veto and the blame is on him. The problem is you have to get it through the Senate.
Right.
Yeah.
And there it requires 60 votes. And either you have to convince some moderate Democrats to vote with you, and so far Democrats have been very loyal to the president and their party, holding the line, or you have to win more seats.
Yeah.
Yeah, and folks who support the Ted Cruz's of the Senate, I shouldn't say multiple because there really is only one Ted Cruz in the Senate, will say he has gotten things done, and this is his argument, by blocking certain things that they didn't want to go through the Senate. It's sort of the reverse of getting things done, but it falls into the column of getting things done by blocking things that Republicans wouldn't want. So, of course, that's his argument. How that would work as president, I guess you have a veto pen. But yeah, unless you have overwhelming majorities, it's frustrating for people at home. We all hear from them and people who say, yeah, we gave them the Senate and more people in the House last time around. Why aren't they getting anything done? The reality is sometimes just really hard to accept.
Look, I'm so sympathetic with the frustration that the results of the last midterm election haven't translated into results, that I've been advocating for the abolition of the filibuster, which is, that's sort of a bomb-throwing move, but I'd like to see it done. I think in the end we'll end up with some compromise on that issue with Democrats, but throw it out and then do exactly what's being recommended by J.J. Tigger, I think it was, or Tigger 806, something like that, which is you pass everything, abolish the filibuster in the Senate, and then Obama has to sign, then you have a sharp division on the issues, and then you go to the election on that. But let me just say one thing about compromise. Today there was the agreement on the budget, which is from a lot of points of view simply horrible. There are all kinds of stuff in here that shouldn't be anywhere near there.
And we'll get into it tomorrow.
However, one of the things that was accomplished is the abolition of the completely obsolete 40-year-old ban on exporting oil, which is exactly what we need. The oil industry is dying because the prices are so low. There's a huge market out there.
Which the administration and Democrats had a problem with.
They did. Well, Obama said he would veto a bill that proposed that. But because Ryan and the others shoved it into this huge omnibus, it will become law in a few days. And that's going to be a good thing. But they had to trade away all kinds of stuff that will, if you're a conservative, will make you very upset. But that's how it works if you don't have control of the government.
And Speaker Ryan, I mean, he laid that out up front, saying they're not going to get everything they want. We're certainly not going to get everything we want. But that's what we have to do to get a budget passed. And think about how long it's been since they've had regular order. We all cover these continuing resolutions and getting up to holidays and all running back from our trips and seeing like whether we're going to go over the cliff again. And it seems like they're trying to get away from governing from crisis to crisis. So, on behalf of Speaker Ryan, he could argue that is progress.
And part of the reason that I think a lot of the things that people who came into office in 2010 and 2014, part of the reason that those things haven't gotten done or even worked on is because Washington has been so tied up in these budget crises. Oftentimes, you get to the end of the year and there's just no time to work on anything else. So in some way, this could clear the deck for next year. It's an election year, so your expectations are low on Capitol Hill, but it could clear space to work on other priorities.
There are people out there who say Republicans, with the numbers they have in the Senate, should be able to convince Democrats or pressure or horse trade or do something to get at least some of the things that some of them agree with over the finish line to get to the president's desk, even though the president may veto it, to just get it there. And the fact that they can't shows how incompetent Washington is. I
don't think that's true. I'll give one example. The worst piece of legislation or negotiations that we have done in the last 30 years, the Iran deal. I mean, everybody from every side knows how rotten the deal is, even Chuck Schumer. Nonetheless, the Republicans, who tried extremely hard, had support of the AIPAC and the pro-Israel lobby and a lot of other people, and really had the administration on its knees on this. The Republicans were not able to muster the votes to stop this. Now, if you can't stop it on something so obviously supremely flawed, then the idea that we can just negotiate, there's a lot of party loyalty on the part of Democrats and loyalty to a president they don't want to see be a failure. And that is a huge factor, and it isn't easily overcome with a wave of the hand.
Kate Twist, last comment. This is what's unrealistic about the Trump candidacy. You can't do what he's saying he'll do. We have a president trying to run things that way right now. Charles Point last night to Bill O'Reilly. Next time we will, let's see, do we have something next week? I don't think so. I'm off Friday.
That's Eve of Christmas Eve.
Yeah, this could be the last special report online for the year. So Happy New Year. Shannon, thanks for joining us. Julie, Charles, Control Room. Here's to 2015 Special Report Online. See you.